Hello and welcome to our tutorial for CIMS Cloud Lite. CIMS Cloud Lite is our web-based online application for managing your cemetery without mapping. To get started, simply go to cimscloud.com, click the blue link, enter the username and password that was provided by the Rainmaker team, and click the blue sign-in button. Within a few seconds, your cemetery data should appear in front of you. CIMS Cloud Lite utilizes this main page to show all critical information regarding a grave space. This main page is broken into two different sections. We have our list section, which shows us all of the grave spaces in our cemetery, a search functionality, which allows us to search various items throughout our cemetery, and then the main detail page, which shows all relevant information regarding a single grave space in our cemetery. To get started, let's take a look at the list menu. Let's say, for example, I wanted to view Section 1, Block 1, Lot 1, and Space 1. When I click on Space 1, you'll notice that the information here has changed, and I now have all the information about Space 1 in my cemetery. I should note that the terminology for section, block, lot, and space can be varied from cemetery to cemetery, so the words that are on your cemetery may be slightly different. When I clicked on Grave 1, the main detail page changed to show me all of the information about this one grave space. The information is broken into multiple tabs. On the Ownership tab, I have basic information about what type of space this is, the status of the space, who owns the space, when the date that it was purchased, the amount that they paid, and any miscellaneous remarks. I also have a really nice image that I've uploaded on the side here, and if I click on that image, I can get a much larger view of the cemetery. The Burials tab contains all the information about burials on the cemetery grave space. What type of burial it is, the date of their burial, who is interred, the relationship from the burial to the owner, who it was that authorized this burial. In some cases, this is next of kin. In some cases, this may be a funeral director. The funeral home, the vault type, the vault vendor, and any miscellaneous remarks. The Markers tab contains all relevant information about the markers or monuments on this one grave space. In my case, I have a flush marker that was placed in 2016 by the Smith Jones Granite Company, and I've made a miscellaneous remark at the bottom that says the $50 fee for marking this out was not for the marker but for the fee of marking it out. Again, I also have a really nice image that if clicked on would show me a larger view. The Deed tab contains all the relevant information about the deed that I've issued for this one grave space. The Documents tab is a place where I can upload as many PDF documents pertaining to this one grave space as I would like. In my case, I've uploaded an obituary for a burial on this grave space. Clicking on this PDF file will open this in a separate tab so that you can view a larger view of it. The Permissions tab is a place where I can keep track of all the people that have permission to be buried on this grave. CIMS utilizes a concept of permissions so that you always can feel confident on who the owners of this grave intended on having interred into this grave space. I'll talk more about this in just a few minutes when I go to show you an example of how we add data. Last but not least is the Care Fund. On the Care Funds tab, I can track anything from annual to perpetual care, as well as items that I may sell such as wreaths, flags, vases, and so on and so forth. The Reports and the Ads Layers tabs over here are additional items that I'll come back to at a later time. Let's go back to the Ownership tab. What I want to do is I want to walk through the process of how we sell a grave, how we add a burial, add a marker, and issue a deed. To do that, I'm going to change my location down here to be space 26, which I have set up as being an available grave. When you first want to start selling a grave, we always have to start on the Ownership tab. Like in real life, you would never do a burial or a marker on a grave space that wasn't owned. CIMS Cloud will prevent you from doing a burial or a marker on a space that does not have an owner as well. So we start with the Ownership tab, and we always start from the top of the window and work our way down. So for example, I could say this is indeed a ground space. I would mark this from being available to sold, and then I would type in the name of the owner. Very consistent throughout the program is going to be the concept of how you enter names. Whenever I want to enter a name into the program, I always start by entering the last name, and a list appears underneath me that I can choose one from, or I can choose an option that says Add New. Again, under co-owner, I could do the same thing. I could click the last name, and as I typed a few characters, I would get a list of those that are already present in our database, or again, I could click the big blue Add New to create a new customer record. In this case, I'm going to forego entering a co-owner. Sales counselor, this could be the person from the cemetery that worked with this family to sell the grave. The sold date, anytime we need to enter a date into the program, you'll always get this nice calendar view. We can select a day from the calendar, or we're welcome to just type in a day and the calendar will update as needed. Cost per space, I'm going to put down $500 for this grave, and then if I had any miscellaneous remarks, I could enter that here. When I'm finished entering this information, I click the Update button, and the program asks me what do I want to update. At this point, I have the option of updating just the current space. I could update the whole lot, I could update selected spaces, or I could give it more refined options such as all spaces that were owned by this person, or all spaces on a lot where I can choose various ones, or all spaces on a block where I could choose various ones. In my case, for simplicity, I'm just going to update the one space that we're currently on. When I click on OK, the program's warning us that we're changing ownership, and then within a few seconds it should say saved, and my data is now stored in the database. The next logical step in the process is to come to the Deed tab. Since I've now purchased this grave space, I'm going to expect to receive a deed from the cemetery. We start with the top of this window and we work our way down. This was not a transfer deed, so I'm going to omit any data in the transfer date. Under deed date, I'll go ahead and choose today's date. For purchase costs, I'll enter the same $500. For need, I will say that this was a pre-need purchase. I can do a pre-need or an at-need. A sales agent, again, this would be the person from the cemetery that worked with me, or in this case, maybe the person issuing this deed. A unique deed number, and there's two different ways that CIMS can handle this. We can set this up to be a self-incrementing deed number, or just a text box here where you can enter in anything that you'd like. In my case, I would like to tell the program that in 2017, this is the 1,234th deed that I've issued. If I had any miscellaneous remarks, I could place that here. And when I'm finished, I could click Create. Again, the program's going to ask me, what do I want to update? And the logic behind this is that in many cases, your deed will be issued to multiple spaces as well. So we don't want you to have to re-enter that information multiple times. We can just simply apply the same deed information to multiple graves. Again, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to update just the current space. Within a few seconds, the information has updated and saved, and now I have an opportunity to print my deed. When I click Print Deed, I get shown here our default CIMS deed. This is a document that we've incorporated into all versions of CIMS Lite, and you're welcome to use it so long as it fits your need. We do have the opportunity to customize deeds. If you are interested in that, please let us know on an individual basis. The next logical step in the ownership process is for me to ask the owners who I intend to have buried on a particular grave space. That's where our permissions come in. The Permissions tab in CIMS Lite allows you to capture the owner's desires for who will be buried. Hypothetical situation, let's say I purchased 4 grave spaces. I would be able to tell CIMS, and more importantly tell the cemetery, that I intend to be buried on grave 1, my wife should be buried on grave 2, and I will give grave 3 and 4, each one to one of my children. In CIMS Lite, we can record all that information by simply entering permissions. So again, I could say Curtis Paul is going to be added to space 26 here, and the program would record that information for future use. If I owned multiple graves, I could go to another grave and I could enter my wife's name, go to a third grave and enter my son's name, and a fourth grave and enter my daughter's name. And again, you would have a full list of who the owners of this grave intend to be buried on this grave. Also in CIMS, we have the ability to print out a permission agreement. This is a contract that says, I, the owner of the grave, intend to have this person interred on the grave. And I would do that now at the time of grave sale so that many years into the future, that information is still stored. The next logical step in entering data in CIMS is probably the burial. Many years have passed and somebody comes back to the cemetery and says, it's time to do a burial on section 1, block 1, lot 1, space 26. There's a few ways that we can figure out where a person is supposed to be buried. For example, since I took the time to fill out my permissions window, I can come back to the left-hand side and I can go to search and I can go down and search permissions. In this case, if I type in the name of the person, Curtis Paul, and hit search, you'll see that it comes up that they're supposed to be interred on one grave. I can click that record and the program will automatically bring us to the grave space that that person is supposed to be interred on. I come to the Burials tab, and placing a burial is very simple. I start by clicking the big green Add Burial button, and the program's going to open up a window, and I'm going to start from the top of this window and work my way down. So for example, burial type, burial date, the name of the person that's interred here, the relationship from the burial to the owner, and I will just choose self since I'm also the person that owns this grave. Authorized by, this could be my next of kin, potentially, or whoever it is that contacted the cemetery that says we need to do a burial. I can keep track of what funeral home was used, what vault type, vault vendor, and if I had any miscellaneous remarks, I could add those as well. When I'm finished entering data, I simply click Save, and the program will save that information and add it here to my Burials tab. The next step is to do a marker. Adding a marker or a monument into CIMS Lite is extremely simple. Click the big green Add Marker. The program will ask us if we want to add a new or an existing marker. In most cases, you will probably add a new marker. But for those grave spaces where a family has decided to put a double or even a triple size marker or monument that spans many graves, selecting existing will allow you to take the record from another grave and apply it to that grave. That way you don't actually have multiple marker records in your cemetery, but are simply linking multiple spaces to a single marker or monument. In my case, I'm going to click Add New. And again, a window will open and I'll start from the top and I'll work my way down. This will be a flush marker and I'll tell the program that I put a foundation under it. I can choose, let's say this is going to happen a little bit in the future. I could choose a date for the placement. A payment, my cemetery doesn't collect any payments for the marker, so I'll leave that blank along with cost and inscription, but I do want to keep track of what company it was that came in and placed this marker. Again, I can leave legal and size and remarks blank since none of that pertains to my particular cemetery. When I'm finished, I click Save, and the program will add that information into the data. Last but not least, I come and I can view all of this information here. You can see that I have owners, burials, markers, deeds. I could add a document if I wanted to for this grave. I can view my permissions, and if I had any care funds, it would all be in here. So you can kind of see that we've gone through the transaction of all the different main tasks that you would perform in your cemetery. The last thing I want to touch on is how to better search your cemetery. The power of CIMS is really the ability to search your cemetery and get to data really quickly. So for example, I'm going to view my list here and I'm just going to arbitrarily select any grave space in my cemetery so that I'm not on the space that I was just on. Let's say I received a phone call today and somebody was looking for the burial location of Curtis Paul. Well, what I can do is I can click on the search button. I come down here and tell the program I want to search burials, and I can simply enter the name of the person that I'm looking for. In my case, Curtis Paul, and hit search, and the program is going to show us where that burial is located. When I click this result, it's immediately going to take us to the window that has all of the information about my burial. Again, because I'm on this one particular grave space, I can click back and still see the ownership, the markers, the deeds, documents, permissions, and care funds if I had any of that information filled out. One of the other unique features of CIMS is that while searching, and I'm going to eliminate a first name here, and I'm going to change this so that I can hopefully get a few more records. When I search, I also have the ability to print my results as well as export my results to a CSV file or an Excel file. This can be helpful when you have large families and you want to try to get some of that data out into Excel so that you can hand it off to the family, or if a parish cemetery may want to use this information in other ways. Same with a city. There may be other means of using the cemetery data to help your day-to-day tasks. So to be able to export data out into either a CSV or an Excel file could be a huge advantage for you. The last thing I want to make sure I cover is the add layers. This button over here that says add layers is how we add various locations to our cemetery. We can add, delete, or rename sections, blocks, lots, or spaces. And some of this can get a little bit tricky because we need to think about how our cemetery is laid out before we do too much of this. The big warning that I always like to give to people is never try and create your entire cemetery at once. If your cemetery is large and you have multiple sections or multiple blocks, it may be advantageous for you to create a single section or a single block at first and start working within the program rather than try and sit down and create every grave space in your entire cemetery. The other tip that I like to give people is if you have grave numbers or if you have lots that are not consistent, so for example, most of your graves or most of your lots in a particular block have 4 graves, but a few of them have 5, I would utilize the program to create a lot of grave records in a lot that had 4 records and then go in and just manually add that 5th space where it's relevant. Let me give you an example. Let's say I wanted to add an entire new section to the cemetery. I would click Add Section, and the program's going to ask me to give it a name. I'm just going to we're going to call this the Raymaker section. The program then asks me how many blocks are in this section. And let's just say there's 2. How many lots are in each block? Let's say there are 10 lots in each block, and there are 4 grave spaces in each lot. The program will then ask me what type of spaces these are, let's say ground space, and a default cost. I'll put $550 for this new area. When I click Add, the program is going to think about this, it's going to save, and then it is going to refresh your page. This is one of the few places in the program where the website is required to refresh. But now when I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I can see that I have a section Raymaker, and inside there I have 2 blocks, and inside each block I have 10 lots, and inside each lot I have 4 grave spaces. So I've now created a few hundred grave spaces that I can sell to the public. Back to my example before, let's say lot 7 was an odd numbered lot, and it actually had 6 graves. What I can do is come back to my Add Layers, and in this case tell the program I only want to add a single space. And it will force me to select one of my existing sections, and one of my existing blocks, and one of my existing lots. And it'll tell me that 1, 2, 3, and 4 are already taken, but I can add grave 5. I could even go ahead and put in remarks, space type, a default status, and a cost as well. And when I add this, the program will now add grave 5 or 6 to the list the next time that I refresh this. I must have done it in block 1 here. Here we go. So now this particular lot 7 has 5 spaces because I've just added a single one. So as you can see, sometimes you have to stop and kind of think about the way that your cemetery is laid out. But using the add layers, it should be pretty simple to create, delete, or rename various items within your cemetery. The last thing I want to go over in the demo here today is these buttons at the very top. Under the name of the cemetery is a thing that says Edit Cemetery and Manage Users. Manage Users is where you would manage the user accounts and the passwords if there was more than one in your cemetery. The Utilities menu here is where we can view disinterred burials, where we can view all of our cemetery reports, and where we can actually download a copy of all of our cemetery data if you would like to do that for personal archiving purposes. Underneath here is a list of all of the different drop-down menus in our cemetery so that we can change the items. For example, let's say under my Burials tab, I wasn't happy with the items that were appearing here. I could go to Utilities and Burial Types, and in here I'm going to have the option to either rename or add new items. I will warn you that you can't delete items from this list if they're in use on a particular burial. So if you tried to delete the adult record, for example, the program would tell us that the burial type adult is currently in use in the program and cannot be deleted. I can, however, rename it, and any burial that was linked to adult would immediately get renamed. The same holds true for all of these different options: branch of service types, funeral homes, marker types, marker vendors, so on and so forth. Whenever I find myself in a window like this that I'm not sure how to get back to my main CIMS Lite page, the Spaces button will always take you back. So if I click on this, again, within a few seconds, the main window of our program should open. Continuing along the black bar on the top, we have reserved graves. This would give us a list of any spaces in our cemetery that we currently had marked as being reserved. We have work orders. I can create a new work order. I can query work orders, or I can print off some work order reports from here. And last but not least, I have our main customers window. Our customer management window, in my case, there's 499 customers in our cemetery at the moment. And I'd like you to think about the word customer as really just every name that's in the program. A customer may be an owner, it may be a burial, it may be a grave permission or a funeral home director. It doesn't matter. Any name that has ever been entered into the program appears inside of our customer management window. And we can search here. So for example, let's say I wanted to search this name that's right here prevalent. I could type in the last name and hit search, and the program's going to whittle it down to just those people that match the search that I've entered. If this list was very long, I could further filter this by typing in something here, and it would now filter out only those records that match. So in my case, since I've started to type the word Alice, the only record that's left is Alice Abbott. I could click on her record, and it would bring me to her space information window. And this is where all of the relevant information about Alice Abbott is stored. Her name, gender, status, maiden name, age, contact information. In this case, she is deceased, so we have a death date. We could also have a death place, a birth date, married date, any miscellaneous remarks. If Alice was a veteran, I could click this and I would be prompted to fill out what war she was in, branch of service, date entered, date discharged, rank, war remarks, so on and so forth. And at the bottom, we can give her a customer type, whether she is a customer, a cemetery employee, or an external client. If I made any changes to this user information, to finish, I should always click Update, and the program will save. Again, because I'm outside of our main window, to get back, I want to click the Spaces button, and the program is going to bring us back to our main window where we can do the vast majority of our work. There are a few other buttons and a few other little tips and tricks throughout the program. Some of those, though, are just things that you will learn by experimenting or by pushing a button here and there as you're going through it. But what I've shown you here over the last few minutes is really the vast majority of what you will need to do to successfully get started using CIMS Lite. If you should have any further questions, feel free to contact Rainmaker. We're here via email or by our 1-800 number. We're open normal business hours Monday through Friday, and we're certainly here to help you. Again, I hope you found this tutorial to be useful, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.